I was just keen to get your take on Iran, because we're getting these conflicting reports coming out, but it's pretty clear the ceasefire's over. What are you hearing, and how worried are you about the impact that this is going to have on the economy?
Well, it's hard. It's always hard to know precisely what's going on. You know, I think the Prime Minister was right to keep us out of it. It isn't our war. We're not directly involved, other than in protecting British people who may come under attack and British assets in the region. But the Prime Minister is working very closely with international allies, both to de-escalate the situation. He was recently touring the Gulf states, our allies in the Gulf states, to try and make sure that we're bringing them together and making sure that their voices are being heard. And he's been working with other allies, notably the President of France, to look at what we can do to secure the Strait of Hormuz so that the supplies of energy can get through once this dreadful war comes to an end.
You're here today to announce new support to try and tackle anti-Semitism. What is it you're doing?
Well, we've seen an absolutely outrageous increase in anti-Semitism across our society in recent months in particular. I was at the synagogue in my constituency in Streatham just this weekend, and we had a big round table talking to members of the community there about how they feel, and they are frightened. I had one grandparent telling me that his granddaughter is just going to primary school, and his daughter, her mother, was too afraid to write down she was Jewish on the form going ahead into that primary school. Now that kind of tells you the level of fear that there is in the community at the moment, and we can't accept that. So the Prime Minister is calling together members of the cabinet, like me, leaders from the Jewish community, but importantly, leaders from other faiths right across society, public services, schools, universities, to sit down and focus on what more we can all do to keep the Jewish community safe. The government's playing its part, but this is something the whole of society needs to be calling out.
On that, I've been really struck by what Samart Rowley said over the last week or so, the head of Met Police. He said that he's trying to confront people about the scale of anti-Semitism. Now is the time to ask difficult questions. Why don't we see more condemnation of the attacks we've seen in recent weeks? Where are all the voices against hate? Where is the solidarity with fellow Londoners? Is he right?
I think Samart Rowley has said some really interesting things recently. That's one of them. Another thing that he said, I think it was in his letter to Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, is that legitimate debate about the actions of a foreign country can never be used to target hatred and abuse towards the British Jewish community. And it's really important that is the case. We need the whole of society to call this out. The leaders of other faiths, whether it's Christian, Muslims, all the faiths that we have in this country today, everyone needs to call this out for what it is, and that is racism that is leaving one particular community, our Jewish community, living in anxiety and fear for their safety. We cannot tolerate that.
Samart Rowley also talked about social media algorithms. If your social media feeds are driven in a particular direction, you get more of this material, you end up absorbing and believing it, and that's dangerous. How worried are you about people, I guess, being radicalised by social media?
Well, I think that's absolutely what's happening. People are being pushed towards extremist content very, very quickly. You're only ever 2 or 3 clicks away from imagery that could have come from the Third Reich on social media. If you're a young person growing up and you haven't had proper information about what happened in the Holocaust, all you're seeing is this extremist nonsense, then that starts to warp your thinking, and we can't allow that. So we need to look at how we can work with big tech to tackle online hatred.
Do they need to do more, you think, big tech on this?
They need to do more, but I think we all need to do more as a society. Government will play its part, but we genuinely need the whole of society to tackle this.
On government playing its part, there's focus on these pro-Palestinian marches, right?
Yeah.
Which many people go on, right? Because they strongly are appalled by the scenes that they see in Gaza, and they want to try and speak out against it. Kemi Badenoch wants to ban them. Is she right?
Everything in society is about balance. The rights of people to freely express their views, but the rights of other people not to be intimidated and targeted with hatred. Now, the crime and policing bill that's just gone through Parliament gives the Home Secretary new powers to take into account the cumulative effect of a series of marches on intimidation towards a particular community, and she can use those powers.
So just to be clear on that, Does that basically mean if there's been a march every single weekend in a particular area, you could say, actually, that's enough, we're just going to stop
That's
that
right.
happening?
That's what the powers would mean. And also some of the language that's used on those marches, globalise the Intifada being, the example that gets talked about the most. Now, of
Do you
itself...
think that just to stay on the banning of marches, because I guess some people would say they have a right to march as many times as they want to if they're doing it in a peaceful manner. But
people have a right to march, but members of the Jewish community have the right to live their lives and go about their business in freedom and to express their religion. Now, Jewish people today are afraid to wear the skull caps, afraid to show the Star of David. In this country, in 2026, that is completely unacceptable. Okay. Jewish people should be as free as a Christian or a Muslim to go around and express their religion freely.
OK, let's talk about the local elections. We can't talk about individual seats, of course, but you've got a lot of experience, I think, in London in particular. Yep. Labour is expected to do pretty badly, particularly in places where they have been strongholds, right? Urban, younger voters turning away from you. How bad is it looking? And what is your message for people who might be looking for change?
You're right. I was the Labour leader in opposition who won back the London Borough of Lambeth 20 years ago, but it was on a night that we did very badly across the country. So I know from personal experience, if you run the right local campaign, you can buck the trend. You talk about the things that matter to voters, they will come out and vote for you. I mean, that also shows me that you can't easily predict what's going to happen in a set of elections.
If it does go as badly as many are expecting, what's your message to people who might be thinking, well, we need to change the leader, we need to do it quickly?
Well, I see these stories in the press as well, but I speak to MPs all the time.
I speak to MPs and councillors as well, and they say, and a lot of them are saying, time's up.
Well, what I'm getting from MPs is they want this psychodrama to stop. They want to focus on what's going to get them re-elected, what's going to get me re-elected is, have we delivered the change we promised at the general election in July 2024? Have we tackled the cost of living? Are we building enough social housing? Are we fixing our broken public services and reducing NHS waiting lists? Well, the answer to all of those is, yes, things are moving in the right direction. Do people feel enough change yet? Probably not. But let's focus on what the British people want. We can't be like the Tories and doom scroll through leaders. It ends in annihilation. We've got to focus on the British public, not ourselves.
You did a quick-fire round with the Times recently, the Times newspaper.
Yes.
You were asked Angela Rayner or Wes Streeting, and you said, I'm having dinner with Angela, so I'll pick her, we're friends.
Yeah, that's right. I had dinner with her on Saturday night.
So what happened at the dinner then?
Huh?
Was it? What did you chat about?
Well, we chatted about normal human being things. We didn't just talk about politics. She's given up vaping for one thing, so we talked about issues like that. We've been friends for years.
Did you talk about the future of Keir Starmer and whether she's going to run for the leadership?
No, we didn't. We had other people there who are not political, and sometimes even we politicians talk about other things.
Anything in particular, that stood out that she was saying? We talk about change in the Labour Party.
Well, all of us want to see the Labour Party delivering the change that we promised at the election, because that is how we'll win the next election. Now, I took over from Angela in the job that I've got now. She was the Housing Secretary before me, and I think she did a great job. She put in place the Social and Affordable Homes Programme. There's £39 billion to build the biggest increase in social housing that we've seen in this country for a generation. Now, I'm getting on and building on her work and getting those homes built. Last year, we built more council homes than we've built in a generation in this country. So, we're proud of the change that we're leading, but we have to focus on change for the British people, not doom-scrolling through leaders or the psychodrama of Westminster politics.
Would you like to see her back in Cabinet?
I think in time, I think she did a great job. I'm a big fan and friend of Angela. She's really good at communicating and cut through to voters. She has a role to play.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Steve Reid, speaking to us.